The modern television landscape is dominated by a specific narrative anomaly, the anti-hero. These characters routinely break the law and violate ethical norms, yet they command audience loyalty at a scale that traditional heroes rarely achieve. To understand the sheer volume of this preference, we can look to a behavioral study by researchers Jordan Wylie and Anna Gantman, who analyzed 5 months of viewership data covering the most popular shows on Netflix. Of the top viewed adult programming, 59% featured a distinctly immoral protagonist, compared to 41% led by a moral character. Mapping their morality against total hours viewed reveals a sharp negative correlation. As morality decreases, audience watch time increases. This statistical reality directly challenges classical psychological models of media consumption, which assume audience enjoyment requires moral approval of a character. The data accounts for years of audience dedication to characters like Tony Soprano. Despite a record of extortion, assault, and murder, his viewers maintained a level of loyalty that defies simple ethical categorization. This sustained loyalty is also evident with Michael Corleone, whose methodical descent into ruthless violence solidified his status as a permanent cultural icon. This preference for anti-heroes is the result of 2 measurable cognitive phases: an initial trigger called moral curiosity, and a long-term mechanism known as schema-driven moral disengagement. The cognitive process begins with an epistemic emotion. When the human brain encounters a gap in its knowledge, particularly regarding social behavior, it generates an internal drive to identify a deeper reason or explanation. Humans are hardwired to model the minds of social deviants. Identifying the motives of a threat is a prerequisite to neutralizing it. An experiment quantified this drive using 4 specific quadrants: morally good, average, bad, and ambiguous. Selection data showed distinct spikes. Participants investigated the extreme agents, good and bad, ignoring the average options. For bad and ambiguous agents, participants prioritized finding the underlying motives. This demand to map deviant minds extends beyond the parameters of a study or a fictional television show. It applies directly to how we process history. The specific psychological mechanics that drove Adolf Hitler remain a constant, obsessive subject of historical analysis. This drive applies to the extreme paranoia of Joseph Stalin, as humans seek to peer inside the mind that orchestrated such atrocities. Moral curiosity serves as the initial psychological bait. Our brains tune into anti-hero narratives because they demand to map the motives of dangerous minds. Once that curiosity draws a viewer in, it encounters a theoretical problem. In media psychology, audience enjoyment is governed by a framework known as Affective Disposition Theory, or ADT. The ADT flowchart plots a 4-step sequence: observing behavior, moral judgment, liking, and enjoyment. A traditional hero's good behavior passes through, unlocking enjoyment. But when an anti-hero commits an immoral act, the moral judgment node flashes red, blocking liking and shutting down enjoyment. If moral curiosity initiates the viewing process, the brain must be utilizing a different mechanism to bypass this ADT bottleneck and sustain enjoyment over multiple seasons. Researchers Sophie Janicki and Arthur Rainey isolated this mechanism by comparing how established fans and first-time viewers process the exact same anti-hero narrative. Their test subject was Jack Bauer, the violent and morally ambiguous protagonist of the drama 24. The researchers exposed both established fans and complete non-fans to a condensed version of the show's first season, then used a multiple regression analysis to identify which factors actually predicted their enjoyment. This dashboard maps the data for the non-fans. For first-time viewers, enjoyment showed positive correlations with character identification and character attractiveness. Non-fans processed the show as Affective Disposition Theory predicts. Their enjoyment was contingent on finding the protagonist attractive. If he acted badly, their enjoyment dropped. When an idealized hero commits a brutal act, it shatters that expectation, placing the viewer in a state of cognitive dissonance. For established fans, the data revealed a stark inversion. Strong negative correlations linked protagonist sympathy directly to enjoyment. Prolonged exposure to the narrative splits the audience's cognitive processing. Fans learn to bypass moral approval entirely, relying on high sympathy to drive their narrative experience. The bridge connecting initial curiosity to sustained fandom is a psychological process known as schema formation. Through repeated viewing, the brain builds a specialized mental framework for the antihero. Because the narrative defines this person as the protagonist, the brain begins to automatically generate post hoc justifications for their actions, rather than subjecting them to real-time moral scrutiny. To eliminate the continuous cognitive friction of rooting for someone who commits harmful acts, the brain adapts by rearranging its own processing pathways. This creates a cognitive timeline. Stage 1, curiosity trigger. Stage 2, schema formation builds a mental framework. Stage 3, moral disengagement, deactivates internal moral standards. The timeline connects to the affective disposition flowchart. The moral judgment node grays out, bypassing directly to narrative enjoyment. This workaround serves a vital psychological utility. It allows humans to safely experience intense empathy for deviant minds without endorsing their actions in reality. It is the cognitive equivalent of experiencing a violent, chaotic thunderstorm viewed from behind a calm, thick pane of glass. The antihero succeeds because the human brain can selectively suspend its moral aversions. This facilitates a safe, deep dive into the darkness of human nature for the sake of untethered enjoyment.